Hi everyone, I'm Manav and I'll be hosting the talk today. Today's talk is a part of the Water Classrooms project of the Living Waters Museum in collaboration with TESF. The Transforming Education for Sustainable Futures, in short TESF, is a research network under the UK Global Challenges Research Fund and is anchored by the University of Bristol. It has hubs in India, Rwanda, South Africa, Somalia, and the Somaliland. In collaboration with the India Hub of TESF at the Indian Institute of Human Settlements and the Living Waters Museum at the Center for Water Research at IISER Pune, we are developing water classrooms for middle school students. These are visually rich and interactive pedagogical tools being developed to engage young minds in understanding water from an interdisciplinary perspective of physical, geographical, scientific, cultural, social, and equity aspects, amongst others, to enable creative problem solving towards sustainable and resilient water futures. The project brings together content creators, water professionals, academics, filmmakers, artists, educators, graduates, undergraduates, middle school students to co-create this pedagogical plan and learn from each other in the process to enable an exchange of ideas and knowledge related to education for sustainable development. We will have a series of discussions. And to kickstart the series, we have with us Darab Nagarwalla. Just introduce the speaker. Darab obtained a BSc in Environmental Studies from Northland College in Wisconsin, US. He worked for 17 years with NGOs working on resolving issues of environmental degradation and livelihoods with village communities of Saurashtra and later in Kumaon and Garhwal in the Uttarakhand. He then reinvented himself as an outdoor and environmental educator and later trained and licensed as a science teacher. He's passionate about the outdoors as a great teaching tool and the need to connect theory with relevant real-life concerns and experiences. He also has a natural affinity, in his own words, with the lovable craziness of the world of middle school students. Today's talk is titled Learning Outcomes and Rubrics, Putting the Cart Behind the Horse. And I let Darab take over and elaborate further on the cart, the horse, and why we care about what the relative positions are. Over to you, Darab.
Thank you so much, Manav. And I'll just go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So thank you all for this opportunity. So I'm going to talk about learning outcomes and rubrics because I think these are two really helpful things for what we're doing with the water classrooms, trying to put together some meaningful lesson plans that middle school kids can use and that can be effective tools for getting across what we would like them to learn about water. And the reason I call it putting the horse behind the cart is because I'll start with a little story, but first of all, it's about backwards design. So the way that most educators go about it, and I certainly am one of them. So for a long time, I used to follow the standard course planning where I would choose not necessarily a textbook, but maybe a topic or whatever, and then figure out what the syllabus was from a textbook or somewhere, and then write up some content, prepare some presentations, and so on. I want to show you this picture because this was a result of one of those things that I did. So I was called in to take a lesson on dichotomous keys, and it was a biology topic, and I got all excited because I thought, what better material to use for teaching about dichotomous keys, but something that we find in our natural environment in the hills, which are ferns, right, during the monsoon. So I got up early in the morning and collected all these different kinds of ferns and thought, oh, great, this will be the perfect thing to teach about dichotomous keys. And so you can see the expressions on these kids' faces. Uh, and here's another one. Now you can probably draw two conclusions by looking at these two pictures, but I think this one is kind of telling. What does that expression say to you? Would anyone like to make a comment? What do you see on that girl's face?
Good evening, sir.
Maybe she's trying.
Good evening.
May I?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. The girl, she's observing the specimen.
Yeah.
I think backward side where the spores or sporangia is there,
Yeah.
minute things are there. She want to observe it carefully. So
Okay.
she has hold it nicely and she is trying to observe it.
Okay. Okay, that's really that's a very nice and detailed observation. So one thing you could say about both these photos is that you can see that the kids are engaged, but one way of interpreting this picture is also that she looks a bit confused. That, you know, she's wondering, you know, what am I looking at? What am I supposed to learn from this? So this is part of my story. So I happened to do this particular session with a class in which my daughter was, and I'd been called in to do several, you know, lessons for different things. And sometime after that, you know, I was feeling very proud about this particular lesson because I didn't have to assess it. That headache I dumped on the teacher. And when I asked my daughter about it, she said, you know, Papa, you've taken several lessons with my class and you've also helped me with my homework. That was the only lesson where I didn't understand anything. So literally, I was stunned, and I realized that I need to actually go back to the drawing board, and I realized that she wasn't alone, that there were quite a few other students who really didn't get it at all. So to come back to backwards design, the difference between following the way that we go normally, and I call that design by default actually, and backwards design is that you try and identify the desired results to begin with. And I'm just going to go quickly back to this slide. Okay, so the big difference is that you actually figure out what your learning goals are before you do anything else. Now, normally, as a teacher, I'm speaking for myself, I get excited about particular activities or topic that I really like, that appeals to me, like this will be fun to teach, you know, or this activity looks like a lot of fun. And then figure out what the kids are actually going to learn from it. But here, you formulate like, what's your goal? And then you sort of come down to, you know, your learning objectives, and then you figure out like what the assessments are going to be, and then your activities. So I'm just going to skip forward again. So first of all, to identify the desired results. Now, if I had done that, I probably would have figured out that using ferns to begin with a group of kids of that age is probably not a good idea because they're not really familiar with them. And they don't really, you know, when they look at ferns, they don't see them the way I do. They don't really see the differences. And then to figure out, like, how will they know when they've actually reached those results or those goals? Okay, so what's the evidence of learning? How am I going to figure that out? How am I going to assess it? And based on that, then plan the learning experiences. So what do I need to do to prepare them for their assessment, and also to get them to actually reflect on what they learn? So luckily, I had a co-teacher actually who had invited me into a class. This was my colleague Angie. She said, let's try it with shoes first, and pencil cases, because that's something they can all relate to. Like, you know, what are the differences between different types of shoes? And sure enough, that actually worked a lot better. Unfortunately, that wasn't with my daughter's class, so she didn't get the benefit of this. But the starting point here, what I wanted to actually emphasize on was clarifying the objectives versus outcomes. Okay, so what is it that we want the kids to get out of a lesson or an activity? That would be the outcome, and what we are trying to teach would be the objective. So if I write an objective, then I'm outlining my material, what I intend to cover, or what kind of questions are going to get addressed. And for my outcome, it's basically what I want my students to know or be able to do. Oh, sorry. So as an example, and I've borrowed very liberally from a presentation that one of my ex-colleagues had made about learning outcomes. So you can see this is about writing paragraphs. Okay. So upon completion of the course, the student will have reliably demonstrated the ability to use the conventions of grammar. Okay. That's the objective. But for my outcome, I have something that is very, very specific. So it's given a paragraph of 10 sentences. The student will be able to, the student will be able to identify 10 rules of grammar that are used in its construction. Okay, so you can see the difference here. The objective is much broader. Okay, it's talking about the cause, what I'm trying to teach in the course, and for my learning outcome, it's very, very specific. There's a particular task, and this is what I want the student to be able to do in that task. Okay, then the next one is a biology one. So this is about a unit. Okay, so upon completion of the unit on plant growth and developments, and then there's three things listed there. Okay, so list the 5 most important plant growth hormones, describe the relationship between carbon dioxide level and photosynthesis, illustrate the transpiration stream in a corn plant. So do these look like objectives to you, or do they look like outcomes? Who would like to say? Anybody?
Outcomes.
Outcomes, exactly. Well, and why do you say that? What is it that tells you they're outcomes?
Because this is something the student can do.
Right. And quite specific also, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So so when we're writing a learning outcome statement, there's a few things to keep in mind. First thing is what kind of action verbs we're going to use. What's the subject content going to be? What's the level of achievement going to be? And those are the 3 that we normally have to keep track of. Condition of performance is totally optional. Sometimes we have something in there about that, and sometimes we don't even bother. Okay, it's just sort of implied. So when it comes to action verbs, this is actually a list of verbs that kind of match what we call Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, and so basically you can see that if you go from left to right, you can see that they involve higher thinking skills as you go from left to right. So on the very left, you have the heading remember, and that's basically the simplest level, right? So it's basically something you already have learned somewhere along the line, and you just have to recall it or remember it. And so you can see the verbs that go along with that, like recite or select or point or recall, recognize. And then if you go across, in the middle, you'll see apply and analyze. And finally, the highest order thinking skills would be to create. So that's where you're able to take something you've learned and come up with something new from it. And you can see how different those verbs are. So for example, construct or design or rewrite or organize or transform is very different from locate or match or memorize or name, right? And in the middle, you've got analyze. So for example, categorize or illustrate or point out or subdivide. Okay, so these are the options that we have for the verbs we should use when we're writing a learning outcome. And then there are a bunch of verbs which we should never use. Okay, and the reason is because those are the kind of verbs that we can't observe or measure. And so they're really difficult to assess. So we should just avoid them. So for example, and these are very commonly used verbs that we all use, you know, understand, know, comprehend, appreciate, etc. Because there's really no good way of assessing whether somebody has become aware of something or has realized something or has understood something. Okay. Step 2, the subject content. So for example, in the statement, develop a business plan for a small business, the subject content is business plan. Describe the relationship between carbon dioxide level and photosynthesis. Subject content is what? It's the relationship, right? Third, the level of achievement, right? So it's basically you need to kind of say how well you want kids to do on this task, right? How proficient they need to be. So for example, if you're talking about a composition course, you might say, write a critique with no grammatical errors, right? So this tells students where they need to be. But you don't need to have this for every learning outcome, right? Because it's kind of implied. And it should be kind of built into your learning outcome that the kids should know how they're supposed to do on it, okay? Conditions of performance, I'm going to really not say much about this because again, this is totally optional. And I personally don't use this a lot. It's only if there's a specific context. And the example here is a field course on welding. So you might say, demonstrate gas cutting techniques with limited supervision. So this basically tells students that they have to do this task, but they will have some supervision. They don't have to do it alone. And just sort of to sum up that the learning outcomes need to be smart. So they need to be specific. Yeah, that's really, really essential because then the kids also, there's clarity for your students. They know what's expected. It's measurable. You can actually measure it and you can figure out how far they've come towards achieving it. And it needs to be achievable also. It needs to be practical. And it needs to be relevant also. Time bound, well, I mean, if it's an assignment, then obviously you have a certain, you mentioned that in your class or whatever, you know, how much time the students have to do it. But basically you need to stick to one verb and one significant subject content. If you get into multiple verbs and multiple content, then it starts getting confusing. So it need to just keep everything simple. But I would say that the specific and the measurable are the two most important things when you're writing a learning outcome. So here's just an example, something that that I had written, and this was it was a topic from a unit on forces. So it was a physics unit for middle school, and for the topic speed, velocity, and acceleration, these were the four learning outcomes that that I came up with. And what I tried to do also was I tried to go starting with a lower level of thinking to a higher level of thinking. So you can see that I started with explain and recall, because I was thinking to myself that recalling the definitions of speed, velocity, acceleration would make sense here, because the kids would surely have come across that before at some point. And then to prepare something, and then finally to design something. And that assignment would come towards the end of that particular topic. So hopefully they would kind of move from a lower order of thinking to a higher order of thinking. So I thought, just for fun, we could maybe just spend a few minutes and see if we could come up with some smart learning outcomes for this particular topic, which was in the list of modules, the one on wastewater. So I hope whoever is working on this doesn't mind that I picked this one.
No, thank you very much. Let me hear.
It could be fun, I thought. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And I'm going to create breakout rooms. Okay, I think everyone's back. So let me just pull up that that slide again to give us some context. Okay, so let's go backwards. Let's hear from group number 3 first. What was the topic that you chose, or the point under wastewater that you chose, and what was the learning outcome?
Who's group 3?
It was, I think it was me, Chavi, and Rohit, Mano. Yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. So we came up with 3 or 4 points.
Okay.
One would be to distinguish. So they have a broad idea of it. What is clean water and what is not clean water?
Okay.
We start off with that.
Okay.
Then point number 2 would be recall the different ways in which you measure whether the water is clean or not, turbidity,
Okay.
pH, things like that.
Okay.
So we call 5 different parameters that are used to measure water quality.
Okay.
Then they should be able to determine the quantity of wastewater that is generated in one family or one house or one unit.
Okay.
And infer if the STP facility,
Yeah.
if there is one,
Yeah.
is enough for one watershed. So in this case, if it is Pashan Lake,
yeah.
so right from Bhugao all the way to Pauna River.
Okay, so that's great, Vikram. So let's have a look at those verbs to start with, and let's match them up with the smart criteria. Okay, so was it a precise behavior? Or was it specific? So you said recall. You had two.
So we had distinguish, recall, determine, and infer.
Infer. Okay. So what does everyone think? Are those specific? Anyone want to say anything about that? Did you find those verbs specific, or did you find them vague?
So infer, I have a little doubt about.
Okay. Okay. So why do you feel that, Sanskriti?
I mean, how would I know whether they inferred or not?
Right. Okay. So maybe you need a proxy word to figure out whether they inferred or not, right? So infer kind of implies that you have a piece of information and you make kind of a leap from that information. You kind of extrapolate or something like that. Yeah,
so that is what we thought, because I mean, what I thought was that they would be having some data, right?
Yeah.
The number of households, length of the river, and the capacity of the STP and things like that.
Yeah.
And they would have to calculate.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's fine. I think that Sanskriti's point is valid, that maybe as that particular word, it might be a little bit difficult to assess. So maybe just a different word that maybe falls within. Let me just go back to that list.
But I liked what Vikram said, that, I mean, in describing infer, saying that you calculate, or you state something,
exactly,
which becomes very whether they calculated, you can see that they have calculated or not calculated.
Right. You can
calculate is you could use calculate actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
You could use the word calculate, and here you've got under apply, you've got compute, you've got interpolate. Over here, let's see. I thought I saw the word calculate there somewhere.
Apply.
Yeah. You can apply. Yeah.
So it's an apply.
It's there.
Yeah, it's there.
So there you are. So there you've got you're definitely up on the level of higher order thinking skills. Recall is basically implies that they already know the stuff and they need to just remember it. Okay. So that's great. I find I agree with Sanskriti. I think infer, maybe calculate would be a better word to use, because that's really what you want them to do. And as far as recall, distinguish, those are all very nice specific words. Those are good verbs to use.
So,
and
here,
they're measurable.
Sorry, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So in analyze, they have infer. In the analyze.
Oh yes, they do have infer. You're right.
Maybe it's like it follows a calc. So you first calculate. But I think you're right that how do you measure infer?
Yeah.
So, are the analyzed ones in general harder to measure?
Harder to measure, yeah. And it's, some of those are a little bit confusing, because you see select under analyze and you see it under remember as well. But they mean two completely different
things.
Yeah. So because select means that you have options. And that's definitely, I mean, when you have options, that's pretty much low down in the order. No? You don't need to actually think of the options yourself. They're already given. But no, I think that's really nice. I really appreciate what you guys have come up with. Thank you. Let's hear from group 2 now.
Which is group 2?
Do you remember who you were, group 2?
And I don't know which is group 2.
Go ahead, Sanskriti. Then.
Okay. Can I just share, because we wrote some down in
yeah, please. I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah. Do these look good? It's like describe a plausible route by which water from our kitchen reaches the nearby river. That's one. Then we thought that, if the activity could be that you use a bucket of muddy water and you use alum to show to the children. So then, the children would be able to, the students would be able to demonstrate how alum can be used to precipitate sediments from muddy water. Draw the difference between how a freshwater lake would look and how a lake with pollution would look. So it's either a picture that you show in class or that they actually visit Pashan Lake. And then list uses of wastewater. Describe or list common methods of cleaning wastewater. Draw a diagram depicting wastewater treatment or water purification. So we had describe, demonstrate, draw, list, draw. Yeah.
All right. What does everyone think? Let's have some comments, please. Are they specific? Are they measurable? Are they achievable?
They're quite specific, but I don't know whether I would call all of these learning outcomes. But some of them seem more activity-based things. Yeah. And to me, an outcome, well, when we use outcome and outputs and things like that, outcome really refers to the theory of change. What do we want? What is the bigger impact we're looking for? Now, in terms of learning outcomes, it's a little different, but I would like to know, what students understand rather than, I mean, some of these can be drafted as learning outcomes, but some of them seem activities.
I think I understand what you're getting at, Sarah, and I think what you're talking about is probably a difference in levels, because here I think what these are actually referring to is within that 1 hour module about wastewater, and now if this is what we want kids to know from that 1 hour, then actually we should be pulling out what activities we're going to do. So here, like you rightly said, there's actually some activities also in there, which normally should be the next stage. And also I think the difference between the objective and the outcome, which I think is what you're referring to. So right at the beginning of the presentation, I was talking about the difference, and the objective is basically what I think, at least to me, it's what you're describing is like what we are trying to get across, and the outcome is what we want kids to know or to be able to do. So the outcomes are very specific, and obviously they'll be less specific if we're talking about an entire course or an entire module, but very specific if we're talking about one particular lesson. So what they're talking about here are actually learning outcomes for a particular lesson, and in fact for only part of the lesson. So that's why they're so specific. But you're right, there are actually some, like for example, demonstrating.
Okay, so I just want to know, Darab, for a lesson, what we are looking at in the water classroom, half an hour to one or maybe 1 hour lessons, how many learning outcomes would be feasible? What would
exactly, that's a really good point. So I think, under each module, if you look at the number of points that are given, they usually, I think, somewhere between what I've noticed, about 2 to 5, and and I would say probably in 2 30-minute classes, you probably wouldn't really want to have more than one learning outcome, maximum 2 per 30-minute class. In fact, realistically speaking, 1.
Right. Yeah, that's
so
that's
two
what I
really.
So basically 2 for each topic.
Yep. 2 for each module, because you do only have an hour, and you're dividing that into 30 minutes. And in that 30 minutes, if you want to actually have some time for discussion, right? Not the kids doing something independently, but talking about it as well, and the facilitators also giving some inputs, then that leaves you not much time. So yeah, that's what I would say. But I think it's a really good effort, and
Yes, it is. Yeah.
lots of thought has gone into it. And in spite of my rushing through those slides, I can see that you've already, like, you're very much on board with changing the wording, because we're so used to using words like understand and learn and recognize, but then when it comes to actually figuring out like how can we actually know whether the kids have understood or whatever, then we get a bit stumped. So this is really good work, guys. Well done.
Thanks. So Darab, there were
go ahead.
And you also, if I may, from Sarah's comment also about the outcomes. I also had this problem, and I kind of made my piece just now during the session, because we are used to writing project outcomes, and the project outcomes are really the way Sarah was just describing. And for me, I would have also written learning outcomes exactly like we write project outcomes, at sort of really a higher order, like goal related. What is the project goal related, project long-term outcomes, that the community will become empowered to XYZ, those kinds. And therefore, I was also translating that outcome word into the learning session. And it was very nice to have this presentation with the examples and the specific words to use, to say that in 30 minutes, you will be able to maybe do like a 15-minute activity through which students will be able to do something like list, describe, draw, something like that, and which you should be able to, as a teacher, assess whether they actually did it or not. And considering that, again, like we're looking at, say, oceans or wastewater. So then because there's so many subtopics under, not necessarily listed in our modules, but when you think about oceans, there are like a million things to speak about, as an educator. Now, when we are saying that in the context of, say, the water classrooms, we will have to really choose what is it that we want, because we have only 45 minutes or 1 hour and 2 30-minute sessions. What is the most relevant thing about oceans for the water classrooms? And we will have to be quite hard-hearted to say, no, we are not talking about biodiversity in oceans. Don't do Web of Life about ocean biodiversity. We are talking about waters and ocean or water cycle and the role oceans play, or something like that. Very specific.
Thank you so much for saying that, Sanskriti. And that's exactly the point that I was trying to get across. And that's why we use the backwards design, because you start with what you and Sarah were just talking about, what you think of as a project outcome, a broad goal, and then work your way down. And whereas if you start with the idea of, okay, ocean, then you've got a list of subtopics, and it'll take you, like, you go, oh my God, now where do I start? But if you think of the broad goals and then work your way down to, okay, I've got an hour. What is it that I want kids to know about oceans? Then you can actually pinpoint, okay, well, I can't do everything. So I'm just going to have to be hard-hearted and pick out what I think is probably the most important. And that means this is what I need them to know. And if this is what I need them to know, then this is a good activity that I can do in 15 minutes. And hopefully they come away knowing something about that. So you see, it's certainly by no means natural for us educators to think like that. It is backwards, actually. But please, let's also hear from group one. We haven't heard from group one yet, so let's get them into the discussion as well before we go any further. So whoever's left, please tell us what you came up with.
That's the group I was a part of, and I think Akriti, you offered to present back.
So please go ahead.
So we came up with 2 learning outcomes. First one being differentiate between wastewater, grey water, and fresh water, and the second being the students will be able to choose among different ways of water treatment the most environmentally efficient or resource efficient method of water treatment.
Okay. And who would like to make a comment about those two verbs? So choose between and what was the other one?
First one.
Yeah, first one was differentiate, right?
Differentiate between wastewater, blue, gray, whatever other kinds of water.
Yeah, and choose between.
Yeah.
Choose between
methods.
methods.
Treatment, yeah. Options.
Treatments. Specific, measurable, relevant. Who wants to say? Someone who hasn't spoken yet. What about those verbs? All right, I'm going to go back to the list of verbs. Okay, so right here I can see choose under apply. And let's see, differentiate. Under analyze, I see differentiate. So clearly they're very much in our list of good verbs that are specific, that are measurable, that are achievable. So good job. Good job, group one. Well done. And I think we've actually reached our time limit. So maybe we can talk about the rubrics another time. I think this was we needed this much time to actually spend some time in a group coming up with some ideas and then actually discussing it and critiquing each other. So I don't feel like really we didn't waste any time. This was all time that we needed just to talk about this. And this is like the starting point for writing good lesson plans. So I'm really happy with what all of you have come up with. And I think you've got the point that it needs to be measurable and specific, and that you need to work backwards because otherwise you'll just be completely swamped, because each one of those topics is such a loaded topic, and there's so much that we as educators or academicians or experts want to get across. We're just brimming with our own convictions and ideas and our excitement, and we want the kids who we are designing these water classrooms for to know everything. But we have a very strong limitation of time, and so we have to prioritize. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Don't feel like this exercise is shortchanging the students in any way. In fact, I think the way I look at it is it's basically trying to create a spark to light that fire, to give a glimpse of something really exciting, and then hopefully that builds on itself and leads to the students wanting to learn more and finding those opportunities, and hopefully their teachers can help them with that, and obviously self-study. So it's basically what we're trying to do is just light the fire, and this is an effective way to do it. So thank you so much, everybody, for taking your valuable time out. And from my side, I do apologize for being over ambitious about how much I could cover in today's session, but I really enjoyed it, and I hope you all.
Sir, may I say something?
Please go ahead.
Sir, now you know that schools are reopening, and every year we some of them I don't know, but every time we were using understand. This action verb was there in lesson plan, but now hence onwards, definitely all these action verbs we are going to learn, and we are going to use that in our day-to-day, means whenever we are conducting our lectures. But it was eye-opening that this type of action verbs are there. Definitely, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's lovely.
So one more
Yeah,
thing.
I also,
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. So Darab, for me, the eureka moment was, so I teach nature-based topics, and they keep on repeating. So third standard, fifth standard, seventh standard, the textbook is practically the same. So with this, what you could do is I could have different learning objectives for different levels.
Exactly.
Keeping the content same. So this was eye-opening.
That's a really great point, Vikram.
Yeah, and I was always wondering, why the textbooks are same every 2 years. So this is what it is supposed to be, and the kids are getting bored. The kids are getting bored by reading the same stuff again and again.
Yeah.
But if you change the learning outcomes,
yeah,
designed specifically as per their age limits and their intelligence, it will be amazing.
Yeah.
I have to
yeah.
go back to the drawing board with my syllabus now. But it was worth it. And this, along with the rubrics thing, will be amazing, amazing this year.
Thank you so much.
And I've just seen the agriculture topic for the water classrooms. It will have to be cut short. It will have to be cut short a lot. We'll have to be very, very specific.
We can talk about the individuals also.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully this helps all of us to,
Yes.
to kind of hone what we're trying to do, and hopefully makes things easier. Because otherwise it's a very daunting task.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Darab. So I guess
Yeah, no, can I just, sorry, Chavi, can I just ask if we can have a part 2 for this topic, that Darab, at some point, where we can collectively go through all the learning outcomes and learning objectives that people have framed for each topic, and maybe, split them into different groups, so people who haven't worked on that topic would then, assess if the learning outcome and the learning objective makes sense now or not. We won't be able to do it right now, but we can do it maybe a bit later in this month with you.
I would be more than happy.
Yeah, I think it would be great. And yes, we can hopefully share your slides as well.
Oh, yes. And as far as following up about the rubrics, I'm more than happy if there's a time that suits next week, preferably before Thursday, because I'll be traveling for a few days. But anytime before Thursday, I'm happy to do a follow-up just on the rubrics.
Yeah, so I guess Manav will follow up. Manav, you can
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, so thank you.
And anything else, any of you are interested in, please do communicate with Manav, and he'll communicate with me. He'll coordinate with me.
Yes,
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for organizing this, Manav and Chavi, and I really appreciate all the inputs from everyone.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Most welcome.
Yes, I will just wind up. So thank you everyone for joining. We will be holding more such sessions, and we would like you to suggest some topics as well. You could follow us on our social media handles to and also DM us there for the various topics. We will definitely have a part 2 of this, and we will get the news out soon. Thank you, Darab. Thank you everyone for joining and making this a very interactive session.